Today we're doing a build review of the Sinner bass drive kit from Musikding and PCB Mania.
Hi, my name is Kristoffer Svan, and for the past 20 years I've been making angry music.
This is going to be a two-part video. This is video number 1, where I review the actual build process, and the second video will be where I review the actual sound and where I compare it to my RPI rack-mounted bass driver and the pedal bass driver. So the Sinner bass drive kit is a collaboration between PCB Mania and Musikding, where PCB Mania did the design and Musikding put together the kit. It costs just under 50 euros, but you also have to buy a case, which is either around 15 euros or 10 euros, depending on if you want it drilled or not. The build was pretty straightforward. The documentation could have been a little bit better for beginners, but if you have built a few pedals before, nothing was specifically hard to figure out. And yeah, I think this is a really good kit if you want a cheap Sansamp bass driver clone. I did have a couple of thoughts on some things, which you will see in the build video. I don't recommend this to a complete beginner, but it was pretty easy, and if you built a couple of pedals, I'm sure you'll be able to make a functioning pedal for yourself with this kit. So let's just jump straight into the build video. So let's do it a little different this time, and I'm gonna talk about what I'm doing and show you instead of just showing you the entire build. I have sanded down the case and drilled out with mistakes, drilled out the side holes. I'm gonna do it in the same way I did the B3K pedal, because Jonas is the same guy who's gonna get this Sansamp as well. Since I know the design from the start, the B3K pedal, I kind of made up the design as I went. But since I know what I'm gonna do, I thought I would do it a little bit different. So it's sanded down. I'm gonna paint the sides next, and I'm leaving the front. Since I'll be using the decal, I thought it would be a lot easier to get it all straight and nice without the holes. But after I painted the sides, I'm gonna sand this so it's close to mirror finish, and after that apply the decal and then drill out the holes. So that's next. Hi! I have painted the case and sanded it down to kind of mirror finish. Needs a bit of cleaning, but that's where we're at. Then I printed out the design on paper just to be able to check, plus my printer, it kind of dries up, so I need to print like 1 or 2 pages before it's actually, you can see it a bit on the side here, hopefully. Kind of gets streaky. That's the word I was looking for. And when I was happy with how it looked, I printed it out on transfer paper, which is still drying a little bit, because with the transfer paper you have to spray paint a clear coat over it, top of it. So next step is to add the entire front design onto the actual pedal, which hopefully goes well. So I see you after that. So I have finished case. Let's see if we can. Let's finish drilling it. I need to do a couple of touch-ups and another clear coat because I managed to get some scratches in there. But the next step is going to be start soldering. So I got the PCB circuit board, got a bag of resistors and the diodes. I have checked that everything is here, so that's what I'm gonna start doing, soldering in all the resistors. And afterwards, if there was any problems or anything to look out for, I have already built one of them and I don't think there was anything in particular, at least not in this stage. So I'll get back to you in a bit. Okay, so first thing I noticed, which is actually true for all the PCB Mania circuit boards, is that for the resistors to slot in, I don't think I can focus on that. You gotta bend the leads really tight. Like super tight to make them to the resistors just slot in. It's just the way it is. Let's continue. Also, since these are dual circuit boards, meaning there's leads going both on the top and on the bottom side of the PCB, it's really important to hold your soldering iron tip on for a little bit longer so you know that the solder flows through the entire thing, so it connects on both the top and the bottom side. I almost made a mistake, really close. I almost put 3.3k resistors in the spot of 33k. I was kind of wondering why I had one left over. Then I noticed I had them wrong because I couldn't see the dot. I normally check all the resistors with a multimeter. I didn't do it this time because I simply didn't feel like it because it takes a lot of extra time. And because of that, I almost made a mistake. Thankfully I found it and corrected it before it became an issue, but that would have been bad. So let's continue with the last ones. Well, there we go. All the resistors and the diodes are in. I cleaned up the board with some isopropyl alcohol and a couple of Q-tips. So that's the first part done. There was no real issues. One thing I noticed with all of these PCB Mania boards are that the resistors, you're kind of jumping around when you're placing them. It's not like R1, R2, R3, R4 in a row like some other makers do. You have to like really search for the correct spot. Not an issue. It just takes a little bit longer to do. So I guess next up is placing the IC sockets. Yep, there we have it. Have it. The 4 IC sockets are in place and I've cleaned up the backside of the board from the flux. I always forget what the English name is. So I cleaned it up from all the flux and the tape residue, as I like to take a bit of masking tape and put it over the IC socket just to hold it in place while I'm soldering. No problems at all, worked out great. So this is where I'm going to take a break, do something else for a while just to rest my head and get a little bit of energy back. Before I continue with the rest, I feel like once I've been doing it for a while, I start to get tired and then I start making more mistakes. So I'm gonna do something else and then get back to it and solder on all of the capacitors and electrolytics. Yo, break done, and so is the unpolarized capacitors, aka film capacitors and ceramic, and those who don't have a direction. So next up will be the electrolytics. Oh yeah, and absolutely no problems at all. Everything slotted in perfectly and had the right amount of everything. Electrolytics are done and the little jumper wire that's supposed to go in between those. I think next up is all the potentiometers and the switches. So I need a case for those to go in. Yay! So the pots and switches are in, as you can see, with the backing on, cleaned up nicely. One thing that's kind of irritating about this build is that I would need to double up on the bolts for the pots because it's standing out a little bit too much. So to get the knobs looking right, I would need to have another screw from the back side so they sink in a little bit more. And I do for the switches, but not for the pots. So that's a little bit irritating about this design, but so far so good. I haven't soldered in the LED yet, but I'm gonna do that. I think next step is actually to do the foot switch because that one needs to be soldered to a PCB as well. That's what I'm gonna do next. But no problems, really. It's a bit tricky to fit all the pots in and solder inside of the case, but it's not too bad. Once you do it a couple of times, you kind of figure out some tricks. So, micro PCB soldering. So the PCB on the foot switch is done, and I thought that while I'm doing it, I might as well add the cables as well. I add a little bit of the heat shrink, not because it really needed it, but I thought, why not? And one thing that's always when it comes to Musikding when they send the kits is they send a bag of these short wires, which work for most things, I mean most kits, but they're almost always a little bit too short for some of them. So for the input and output wires, I went through my stash and got some other ones. So if you're doing Musikding kits, you should probably get some wire as well that's longer than what they're providing. I feel like it's almost every kit. I mean, can put two together and get the right length that way, but that's kind of ugly. So I try to use full length wire whenever I can. I think what's next is actually wiring this board before I take this out. Touch up some of the sides with a little bit of marker and spray paint it with it. Clear coat again if the wind has stopped blowing, which when I was out earlier it hasn't, or I might even just do it inside. I mean, I just need to touch up a couple of spots. My neighbors aren't too happy with that, I'm guessing. More wire on the main PCB. That's what I'm doing now. Hopefully you can hear me, but yeah, wiring doesn't look pretty now, but hopefully it will when I'm done. So yeah, let's put this in the case. Well, here we are again. The wiring is done, hopefully without mistakes. Yeah, so pretty much the only thing to do is put knobs on this thing. So let's do knobs, and then Studio Chris gets to announce what's next. Holy fucking hell. Yeah, I put it together and it didn't work at all. So I checked all the wiring just to see if I did something strange or wrong. Everything looked perfect. I switched out the IC chips. Nope, worked perfectly, or didn't work. So I did some digging around and measuring a bit with the multimeter, and I noticed that I had a ground, or the inputs. The input and outputs were connected to ground, which was really weird. And even if I took the jacks out of the case. So what I found after a while was that somehow in between here, in the middle, something is stuck. I don't know what it is. It looks like, I don't even know what it looks like. But something got in between and shorted out these two pins, and I tried to get them out, but it was really hard. But I have a few more of these lying around with the same PCB, so I soldered in that one instead, and now it works perfectly. So that was a fucking headache. So the only thing I'm gonna do now is clean up the new PCB, and this is what it looks like. Fucking impossible to show something that's shiny, but yeah, everything works. So the only thing I need to do now is put the back plate on. I'm not gonna paint it. I touched it up with some black marker on the sides, and the bottom is scratchy, but Jonas is gonna put Velcro underneath anyway, so the bottom isn't gonna be visible. So I'm just gonna leave it as it is, and what's following is, I guess, the test to see how it compares to the pedal and the rack mount version. So take care.